So today I am going to put all the questions you ever wanted to ask, or the questions you were afraid to ask, to an actual real life narcissist. This is the nameless narcissist. He is a simple man diagnosed with NPD. Bear in mind, he's no clinician, but I am.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, everybody, I also have a YouTube channel. Go there after this.
You check out his channel. It is one of my favorites on YouTube and will really give you a lot of insight into narcissism. So I wanted to talk a little bit, Jacob. Do you want me to edit that out?
Sorry, what's that?
Because I said your name.
I don't give a fuck. I said my name in literally my second episode of my channel, and people will be like, "Nameless, you said your name. I want to edit that out." I'm like, "Dude, the war's over. Like, thanks, but like, we're done."
So I wanted to do this. So most people, I think I have a range of viewers on my channel. I know I have quite a lot of people who've been through abusive or really painful relationships with people who probably were narcissists. I have some narcissists who view my channel. I also have some people who are currently in relationships with people who are quite narcissistic, who are trying to figure out kind of how to manage those relationships. And I also have quite a few professionals who watch this. So I have to behave myself. But one of the reasons, one of my motivations for going on YouTube, I think it's similar to yours, is that I saw so much about narcissism that just isn't accurate and is quite hateful and vitriolic. And I wanted to kind of present a different take on it. And I wanted to kind of make sure it was like an accurate take. And I think working with people who've survived abuse, where they've come to see their partner's narcissistic, rightly or wrongly, often rightly, I think it can be really helpful to understand narcissism, but really understand narcissism, not the kind of caricature of narcissists are evil demons preying on everybody, but understanding it so you can make sense of the behavior and kind of make peace with it. And obviously there's lots of benefits to understanding ourselves, understanding our relationships. So I'm hoping that's what we'll get out of this. But,
I hope so.
Yeah. But I would like to hear from you, kind of what you think narcissism is or what it means to you.
I'm assuming that we're talking about the pathological sort rather than like narcissism in general, because I do, you know my little tirade about the spectrum of narcissism, so to speak.
Give your tirade.
I guess I could say that now. So basically, a lot of people view pathological narcissism as, it's like a spectrum of narcissism from like low self-esteem to confident and then pathological narcissism. And I'm not a fan of that spectrum in itself and how that's structured, because there's an implication there that people who are pathologically narcissistic are have excessive self-love. And I have never met a narcissist like that in my life. I believe that if we were to have a spectrum of narcissism, it should be extremely like arrogant, extremely egotistical, self-absorbed, but like in a non-pathological way, going down to healthy confidence, then down to low self-esteem. And I think pathological narcissism should be even lower than that. Because what is narcissism? It's a rejection of yourself and trying to convince everybody around you that you're actually better than what you actually are, or at least how you perceive yourself to be. And needing constant affirmation to tell you that, no, like I'm not awful. I don't deserve to hate myself. No, I'm actually better than everybody else. And hence why I think that spectrum is a little disingenuous. And if I were to have to define narcissism, because obviously there is a spectrum of narcissism, I'd say how it presents in people can be so wildly different. There's going to be people who are blatantly grandiose, blatantly confident and stuff like that, don't have any self-awareness. There's going to be people like me who are still pretty grandiose presenting, but I like to think that I am, I have more of an intellectual style about me, I like to say. And I try to be polite and kind, and I try to be very covert about my grandiosity and my personal relationships. On my channel, I don't give a shit. I'll say, yeah, I am better than most people. And then also there's going to be people who are very vulnerable presenting. They'll still have the grandiosity somewhere in them, but you're going to see them and they aren't going to look like confident people at all. They're going to just look like blatantly self-hating. And to me, what makes a true pathological narcissist is self-esteem regulation issues. Me personally, there's going to be days I feel like on top, well, hours maybe, I'm on top of the world. I am better than everybody. I truly believe that like I am like a superior person in general. Then there's going to be days if I'm not getting my narcissistic supply or self-esteem juice, as I like to say, that I don't look grandiose at all. I'm very openly self-hating. I'm very like depressed and like in particularly bad situations, almost suicidal. And I think that really is the core of it, trying to manage your self-esteem so you can't hate yourself.
Yeah. I really like your kind of take on narcissism as a way to regulate self-esteem.
Yeah.
Because it really fits as well with the literature that people with narcissism have wildly fluctuating self-esteem. From the
Especially,
high, you have that boost, and you're in that kind of grandiose state to the
yeah.
crushing lows.
Yes. I mean, I almost feel hypomanic sometimes when I'm for example, I did that interview. I shouldn't say what. I did an interview with a news publication. And afterwards, I literally ran to a park and was like skipping, like because of how grandiose that made me feel. I was kind of I remember I went on a live stream after, and I was kind of be very a dick and dismissive of people because I was like so grandiose in the moment. That's really what it is. It's not, to me, it's not high or low. Well, I would say low self-esteem always, but it's a fluctuation between grandiosity and hating yourself and constantly needing to be in the good section.
Yeah. So with that in mind, how do you feel about narcissist being used as a term for anyone we don't like? Anyone who's hateful or abusive or just not wanted, not liked, people we'd like to stay away from?
I mean, as a narcissist, I'm not a huge fan. Honestly, I was like thinking about this the other day, and I think what the issue is that I feel like there are people who are, very egotistical. They do love themselves more than usual. And like those people are called narcissists because they have very similar behaviors, at least on the outside. But that I think that there should be a difference between a narcissist, aka a arrogant asshole, and then somebody with NPD, somebody who is pathologically narcissistic, and this is a defensive structure to try to manage it. But that still leads into the issue of conflating asshole with narcissist just because of the similar terminology used. I think that it's just not a helpful term for anybody, not to mention that you could have an abuser who is abusing you for completely different reasons, maybe like pathological reasons too. They might have OCPD, they might have paranoid personality disorder. But since we view it, because like both of those disorders have very controlling behavior, right? And that's associated with narcissism. I have thoughts on that, but I'm not going to get into that right now. But because narcissist and narcissistic abuse, stuff like that, is so inherently tied to like abuse in general, we are limiting how we can view abuse. We are limiting the fact that we cannot actually manage some abusers and stuff like that because it's only through this lens of narcissism. And if you're getting advice about how to deal with a narcissist, but you obviously can't diagnose anybody. And so if you're wrong about if it's a narcissist, you're making your situation way worse.
Yeah, there is certainly the potential to misidentify someone as being narcissistic when their motivations are quite different, and some people are just criminals.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny too, because I read this really good study. It was like called pathological narcissism through the lens of performative self-evaluation. That's it. And they pointed out that narcissism is about self-esteem regulation, as I said. And the narcissists, they want status. Let's say factor one psychopaths, they want power. And because those two things are so intrinsically tied in our society, they can be mistaken. The motivation can be completely mistaken for one another. If I want power and if I want respect, I'm going to the same areas, even though it's just respect that I want.
Yeah. Right. That's interesting. What about for you? So how did you come to see yourself as a narcissist?
So I always knew something was kind of wrong. I think you can't, not stupid, but like you have to have some degree if you're completely unaware, maybe you'll miss it. But for me, I was always like, okay, like for example, when I was really young, I went to a funeral once, and it baffled me how many people were like showing these very intense emotions. And I kind of assumed everybody else was faking, but at the same time, I was like, nah, who knows? And I realized that I navigated interpersonal relationships really differently than other people. I knew I was way angrier than other people. I always kind of knew something was off. I just had no idea what it was. And especially since the common, like, how we think of narcissism isn't accurate. So I'm like, well, I don't love myself. How could I be a narcissist? Eventually, like, and like blatantly, I had a very long trail of destruction behind me my entire life. And it was also hard to ignore that a lot of times, but I was also just kind of like, how do I put it? I was very good at shifting blame back then, I guess. And eventually I just had a relationship where I was kind of self-destructive. I was really just did not treat the girl right. And I asked myself the question I've asked my entire life. Why did I do that? It's confusing when you're a narcissist. You have no idea why you're doing these things, and it can be distressing. I'm like, why the fuck did I do that? My friend Tess, or Spirit Narc, she like me and her talk about that all the time. It's like it was so annoying not knowing why I was doing these things, because I'm like, why am I ruining my life every turn?
Yeah,
And
that's
so
another
that
really good channel.
was that.
Chipping in Spirit Narc is another really good channel if you want to get some insight into what narcissism is actually like.
She's a good friend of mine. Go check her out. Then what was I saying? But yeah, and then because of that relationship, went to therapy and was eventually diagnosed. And here I am.
How was that process for you to find a therapist?
Like, how do you mean?
How did you find her or him?
Ironically, my mom actually recommended her. And I was like, screw it, whatever. I mean, it doesn't really matter who I go. In my mind, it didn't matter who I was going to, right? I kind of viewed my therapist as a tool to help myself, more or less. And so it was like, like as long as I have any sort of credentials, it's fine. And I'll be honest, after I found her, I lied to her face for like 2 years because I couldn't deal with the shame of a lot of parts of me. And she had no idea I was a narcissist. 2 years, she had no fucking clue. And then the only reason she noticed was we had one day in our session was like wrapping up, and I was like complaining about one of my friends. And I remember I just chuckled to myself, right? And I was like, but it's not that surprising that they're acting like this. And she was like, what do you mean? I was like, I mean, they're just so fucking stupid. And then I went on this whole tirade about what, and then she's like, wait, what? And I'm like, I mean, look at them and look at me. I mean, look at the difference in intelligence. And I went on this grandiose tirade. And she's just like standing there, like obviously in shock. And I stand up and I'm like, oh, that felt fucking good. And then she was like, yeah, I am humbled. And I was like, are you mocking me? It was one hell of a journey, that's for sure.
Was that the first you let her see that narcissistic
Yes.
side? Had you been hiding it?
Cool, because yes, that was the first time, hands down. I mean, I dropped some. I would say like, I feel like there was times that kind of slipped out, but never that blatantly. Because like, I don't know, I learned at a pretty young age, people don't like it when you're grandiose. How the fuck am I supposed to get people to love me if I'm being grandiose all the time and saying I'm better?
So you hid it for a while?
I mean, with my therapist, yeah, it would come out in other ways, obviously.
How was that realization kind of 2 years into therapy when you had to kind of confront that grandiose side?
At that point, I was a lot more at peace with it than I was like when I started therapy, to say the least. I remember when I was in, I just graduated high school, and I have this question I ask people sometimes: what's your cardinal sin? Like, which of the 7 deadly sins are you most guilty of? Because I just think it's a fun conversation. I remember one of my buddies, he was like, Jacob's is pride. And I literally like, you're just fucking gluttony, because he's like overweight, because I got like really pissed off he said that. And then, like, as I said, it honestly felt good to say that thing I had been thinking for so long. but then afterwards, I almost immediately felt a lot of shame for openly talking about it like that, because it was kind of embarrassing, because I knew that people didn't like that about me.
How did that affect the relationship you had with your therapist? Because that's when it's going to get real, right?
Like, that's a good question. I don't know. Well, I mean, what relationship is what I'd say, if I'm being honest. Because I never viewed it like a relationship. Again, as I said, it was just this person I'm basically using as a tool to help myself grow.
Do you still
And
feel one?
yeah, if I'm being honest.
Oh my God. Every therapist
We're
watches
years of
this,
therapy,
like,
right?
it's like a knife to the heart. Oh my God.
I'm pretty open about it too. I'm like, yeah, like, what relationship? I'm paying you. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I have a hard time feeling like I have a relationship with most people, let alone someone I'm paying to talk to me.
Wow. I'm not quite sure what to say.
Hmm?
I'm not quite sure what to say. Wow. It's like,
No offense, by the way.
ooh, none taken. None taken. My clinical supervisor always says the caring is free because you can't pay her to care.
Yeah, my therapist said something similar. What'd she say? She was like, why would I still be treating you if why would I still be treating you if, like, I didn't care to some degree? And I was like, because I'm paying you. And she was like, well, I could have like I could have recommended you to somebody else by now. And I'm like, I guess that's true. Still don't believe you. That's actually a big issue that I have, not believing that anybody could ever care about me. I have that issue consistently.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I wanted to ask you about how that therapeutic relationship has developed over 4 years. It's a long time to work with
Yeah.
someone. And well, maybe it's easier to ask how have you changed in those 4 years?
I would say the biggest part is that a lot of my preconceived notions about people, the world, and stuff like that, it's a lot harder for me to believe those things nowadays, which sucks.
Wow. So
I wouldn't.
what's harder to believe?
Well, one, my grandiosity, obviously. That the world is like cruel, that I don't need anybody, that I don't care about anybody. Um, one of the funny ones was that I'm not a manipulative mastermind. um,
So what you wanted to believe you were a manipulative mastermind?
yeah, it was inherently tied to my grandiosity, actually. And I think that also had a lot to do about because I use other people to define myself. And when you're hearing about narcissists all the time, that they're like evil manipulative masterminds, I'm like, oh, that's kind of fucking cool. Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I for a while I was convinced that I was like better at manipulate. I thought it took a very smart person to manipulate, which nowadays I can't believe. I think that anybody is capable of a lot of manipulation. If you have more information than somebody, it doesn't matter who's smart.
Mm.
I still think I'm a better liar than most.
Wow.
Yeah, I know it's grandiose. I don't care.
Yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's like you've shifted your views. Old ideas, old habits are becoming a little less believable, a little more obviously false. That kind of false self that is the feature of narcissism, right? That
Yeah.
you present to the world.
I would say that it's funny too, because in a way it changed almost in the opposite way. Because since I realized that I needed people's attention and stuff to feel happy, well, I kind of realized that earlier on. I actually vividly remember when I realized that. I was like literally 15. I remember like I was at like a lunch table and I was like a lot more reserved before. Like this is after I basically decided I was going to be like, I'm going to be cool. I'm going to be charismatic. I'm going to show everybody that I'm worth being around. And I remember like I was talking to like this table and I was being like center of attention and like gregarious. And like I walked away feeling like high. And I was like, oh, it's attention that makes me feel good. And once I realized that, it was a conscious effort to get attention at that point. And even more so after, and even now, as I say, I know that part of the motivation for my YouTube channel is for attention. That's not the only motivation, especially now, but knowing that and knowing that it makes me happy allowed me to get it in healthier ways as opposed to the more negative ways that I could have gotten in the past.
That's really interesting as well. So I'm interested. What made you start a YouTube channel?
So it was last February, I want to say early last February, and I was a wreck. I couldn't find work. I had blew up on a bunch of my friends and lost a bunch of people. It was around the holidays, and I was just depressed as fuck. And so I was like, I need somewhere to vent and also get some attention, make me happy. And when I started doing it, and the way that people started reacting to it, and like I mentioned this in my last video, like I remember like the moment it changed for me was when this woman, I'm not sure if I should say her name, but she commented saying, like, thanking me for sharing my experiences because she had cut off her mother because she was like narcissistic. And everybody on the internet was saying, you have to go no contact, blah, 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 blah. The evil manipulative mastermind, right? And so she did, and her mom died. And she was having a really hard time grappling with that. And when she found my channel, she thanked me because she was like, this makes so much more sense knowing this is a constant need for self-esteem regulation, as opposed to my mother never loved me and was only used me and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so that's when it started to be like, well, this is, I'm feeling an emotion I don't understand. It was basically my reaction.
I can so believe that. I can so believe it. And I think that's also one of one motivation I have is that when I've worked, particularly with adult children of narcissistic parents, they have these very complicated relationships with their parents. And I think it is really beneficial for them to have an accurate understanding of narcissism that doesn't in any way diminish the abusive behaviors in some cases,
Yeah.
but also allows them to understand the drivers and to have an accurate picture.
And know that no contact isn't the only way you have to navigate those relationships.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I was trying to think of, oh,
But what is
and
I'm really
sorry,
interesting. What is that emotion that you felt?
I don't want to think about it. I genuinely, I don't know. Maybe compassion, I guess, because it's interesting because everything I do feels fake and like a lie. And so I would try to help people genuinely. And like, it just felt like it was for attention, no matter how hard I tried to make it genuine. And so me doing the channel and not really intending to help anybody, but then I just did, felt more genuine than me going out of my way to try to help somebody.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. Also, it's normal to have some sense of pride and a nice feeling when you realize you've been helpful to someone. And as one of the things I find when I talk to kind of more self-aware narcissists like you, is that suddenly everything you ever do is viewed through that lens of narcissism.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you get to be proud of the things that you've accomplished. And you get to be helpful to people and you get to enjoy the healthy sense of connection or pride or value in doing that. That's not pathological.
Yeah, it's weird. It's just,
I mean, it can become very grandiose when you're like, I am the best person in the entire internet to help people.
I'm the best narcissist.
Absolutely.
But like, I'm again, it's weird. Just everything feels so fucking fake.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. I wish I could convey that better. Because like, I don't know. It's imposter syndrome is really bad in pathological narcissism from what how I feel and how a lot of other pathologicals also tell me. Um, it just feels like, oh, fuck, I wish I could convey it better. I don't know, just nothing feels genuine. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
And I will point out that it's not just narcissists who do that, viewing everything. I was mentioning this beforehand, but it was really difficult with some of my friendships after I was diagnosed because all of a sudden everything I did was viewed by them as through the lens of narcissism. And sure, maybe they're right in some instances, but that didn't mean that the behavior was necessarily bad. And it feels like
Can you give an example?
since so a way I cope with my grandiosity is like making jokes about it, right? Like when I say like I'm the best narcissist, like I kind of believe that, but I know it's not true, but I do believe it. But I have some fucking double thing going on with it. And I think that's one of the better coping mechanisms for my grandiosity. And at first, before I was diagnosed, everyone thought that was hilarious. Then after I was diagnosed, it felt like everybody had this need to cut me down because I knew it was related to my narcissism.
How does that feel?
Bad. I mean, especially bad because like me sharing my diagnosis, I hid my diagnosis for so long. So me finally sharing that diagnosis was like a huge vulnerability thing. It was probably one of the most vulnerable I had been in my life up to that point. And so it felt good at the beginning because it felt like they weren't rejecting me for it. And then it felt like they were rejecting me for my narcissism.
Yeah.
And that sucked. It honestly set back my recovery quite a bit. Not gonna lie. I have some, I mean, and that's not all of them. There's a good portion of them that were like, still that like it did accept it genuinely. But I lost a lot of friends over it, not gonna lie.
Over the diagnosis of narcissism rather than behaviors that would hurt people or push them away?
Both, yes. In fairness, I would say, again, as I was saying, it was like they're viewing all my behaviors through that lens of narcissism. And so I guess it wasn't, well, okay, one person it was directly because of the diagnosis, because they came across some not so accurate information on the internet about it and just believed it. And whatever. Eventually, I kind of came to terms with that because it was like, okay, if they are willing to not be able to look past my narcissism and will take what is objectively the worst of the worst narcissists, even if they are narcissists, and apply that to me, despite how long they've known me, then fuck them, I don't need them anyway. But so there's one person who directly did it because of that. But like the bigger issue was since I was being looked through the lens of my narcissism, it was like pushing me away all the time and like rejecting who I was. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So is it that there were behaviors you were engaged in, like that kind of humor around your
Yeah.
grandiosity, that suddenly, that maybe in the past would have been seen as charming and quite amusing, suddenly
Yes.
became pathological, and we can't let him get away with this, and we have to challenge you?
Yeah. Basically. It's like, yeah, I hate myself. Better cut me down. So, because it's pathological, I guess. But
And
yeah, that was.
I'll say something here too, because I you sought therapy without knowing or calling yourself a narcissist.
I had an
And
inkling, in fairness, but like, yeah, I didn't think I was. I didn't think I was pathologically narcissistic.
yeah, but I think the mental health system, the mental health field in general, makes it very difficult for narcissists to seek help.
Oh
And
yeah.
there are ideas about narcissists are untreatable, they can never change, they're dangerous to work with.
Yeah.
I don't know how
It's
you start seeking help if that's the dominant narrative.
like people, I always hear people like, I hate the whole, oh, if you question a narcissist, you're not one. Bullshit. Fucking bullshit. I question if I was a narcissist. I came to the conclusion probably not, but but I definitely questioned it. And that's another thing. Like, if you're telling people, I mean, I didn't write a case study where the person didn't have some kind of inkling. Not gonna lie. But like, if you recognize somebody is a narcissist early on in treatment and they don't know what that means, they're going to be like, "Oh, you're telling me I'm an asshole," basically. And it also feels inaccurate because how flawed of a view we have of narcissism.
It's true. I mean, I have had many conversations with people who have, I mean, I don't generally diagnose people as narcissists. It's not how I work. But occasionally I've been asked, do you think I'm a narcissist?
Yeah.
And the first thing I say is, hang on, are you asking, do you think I'm a narcissist? Or are you asking, do you think I'm the bad guy? Because those are different questions.
Yes.
And then
And
I'll outline in detail, this is what narcissism is. And this is narcissism, a way of protecting your underlying sense of vulnerability, feelings of shame and defectiveness, feelings of not being good enough, feelings of not being loved, by presenting some kind of grandiose image to the world. And that's what you do, right? And put it that way, and people are much more able to go, yeah, that is me.
Especially since like, and like another big thing is like, it makes us not feel seen. Does that make sense? Like,
say more.
Like for me, because I'm terrified of vulnerability, right? And I feel like nobody really knows me, and that like I'm always hiding myself, and that nobody really will ever be able to see all of me because I'm constantly hiding myself like that. And because I am terrified, I'm terrified of being rejected for it. And like, but then there's also this like parallel feeling of like desperately wanting somebody to basically force me to peel back those like layers beneath myself, and for somebody to really see me, to really know who I am, and like, and not just accept that I feel like a monster, but like love me for being a monster as well as my good parts. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, but I'm wondering how best to make sense of that, because it's an interesting thing to say. And I don't want to go into therapist mode. I'm not your therapist.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But you can see how people reject so much of you and so much of the kind of narcissism.
Yeah.
What is it that you would like people to appreciate about your narcissism, or the narcissistic parts, or whatever way you want to phrase it?
I feel like it's not even tied to the narcissistic parts, like not exclusively. It's just anything that feels real about me feels almost unlovable. And narcissism is one of the only things that does feel real about me, in fairness.
Okay.
But it's like, I feel like if somebody tells me that I'm a good person, I effectively tricked them, that they don't actually know me if they think I'm a good person, which is pathological in itself, right? But like, oh yeah.
I remember in your live chat, you referred to yourself as a shitbag. And I just was like, oh, you're not a shitbag. And you were like, yes, I am. I'm most definitely a shitbag.
I was mainly, well, okay. I was doing the same thing where I was joking to cope with it, but whatever.
You were employing your humor as a defense.
Exactly. I think my humor, yeah, you want to know how I really feel about myself? Look at literally every one of my jokes that I make. See, that was a joke and it was true.
Yeah. The cat's out of the bag now.
Damn it. People gonna go on my channel and be like, wait, that's what you think about yourself? Fuck.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh no. All right, never mind. We can't post this.
But I think humor is such, and I think I agree with you. It's not an unhealthy coping mechanism. You know, but it helps to sometimes notice, hey, I'm using humor and there's something else going on.
That's probably one of my pathological behaviors I recognize the least of when I'm using humor as a coping mechanism, honestly. I mean, like, I realize it most of the time, but like, that's probably what slips my, that and entitlement are the two things that always slip my fucking radar, basically. Everything else I'm more or less aware of, give or take.
How do you feel now about, I mean, because like using humor in that way, I mean, that's not pathological. It doesn't really hurt people. It probably keeps
Yeah.
people at a distance. Probably means people don't get close to some of those more vulnerable feelings that you have underneath the humor. But how do you feel about maybe the ways that you've hurt people, the ways you hurt your ex-partner?
Complicated. I don't feel guilt, but I feel a lot of shame. Or I probably, more accurately, I probably do feel guilt, but it's buried beneath the shame because it can be overwhelming, especially when I realized what shame was and I differentiated. I had 3 emotions in it when I was in high school: angry, good, and bad. And once I was able to recognize that one of the bad emotions was shame, it was it just really did become very overwhelming. And to this day it is. I feel ashamed of how I hurt people. I regret it. I'm not sure if I feel anything more than that. It's very confusing when I think about it.
Yeah, it's different to guilt.
It is extremely, extremely different.
I know it is. I want you to explain it.
I don't know. I really don't. I think I felt guilt once strongly, and I was literally tripping on shrooms. And because like it was an emotion I was like fucking bewildered by. And I was like, whoa, this is weird. And it felt very other focused, if that makes sense. While the shame was more about me intrinsically being flawed, I guess it was more about the action with the guilt.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I always think that guilt is when you say, I did a bad thing.
Yeah.
Hurt someone. And your concern is about the impact of the bad thing you did on someone else.
Yes.
It doesn't require you to hate yourself for doing it.
Yes. And that's the thing. I only hate myself for doing it. It's not about how it affected them, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, and the issue really does come up where I don't feel different than my actions.
Yeah.
My actions are whatever I'm doing in the moment, that is who I am. So if I hurt somebody, that is who I am.
Mm-hmm. It's that real defectiveness, isn't it? I am fundamentally flawed and defective.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. Defective is my go-to word to describe myself. And when you said defective the first time, I'm pretty sure you noticed that I do that and I use that verbiage. I'm not sure if that's true or not, though, if I'm being paranoid. But
it's also one of the core schemas in schema therapy.
Gotcha.
It's not a name, it is a recognized thing. So people use their own language. It just so happens you do use the exact same language that schema therapists would use for that one. So there you go.
Okay. So it wasn't manipulative on your part. Got it.
Not manipulative on my part, no.
See, that's a big issue too. I feel like everybody has ulterior motives a lot of the times, which is inaccurate and probably really damaging for me. But like, I'll notice little things like that, and I'm like, that was pointed in order to get a certain reaction out of me. Like very frequently, I feel like that.
Yeah.
What were we talking about?
Defectiveness.
Oh, yeah.
That? So like you're talking to me and you're kind of thinking, why did she use that word? Does she know something?
Yes.
Is she pressing a button?
I guess I didn't suspect it was a bad thing necessarily. Here's a good example. I once got my therapist to use a curse word, and I was very proud of myself. And I noted, and that's why therapy is so hard for me, because therapy is manipulativeness to some degree. Like,
that's an interesting definition, but okay, go on.
Yeah, I mean, okay, but it's like you guys trying to say things in specific ways. You guys think about things and come to certain maybe not certain conclusions, but to make us come to conclusions.
Yeah.
So that's manipulation. But that's also another thing. I don't view manipulation as inherently bad. Okay. It can be used for bad reasons, but if I manipulate somebody into doing something good for themselves, Why is that bad?
Give me an example.
Fuck. Relevant if somebody's in an abusive relationship and I manipulate them to breaking up with them.
Interesting.
And
How would you manipulate them?
it would depend on the person and the situation surrounding it. It would. I'm trying to think of like an explicit example that I remember. When I was younger, I was and that's the issue, is that like I can't say what is good for people or not. Hence why I shouldn't be playing God and doing that.
Exactly. Yeah.
But at the same time, I know it's better for them. It's a joke. I'm joking. I know rationally, at least, that I don't.
But I think many people struggle with that too, Jacob. When you do see a friend or someone you care about in an abusive relationship, a lot of people will go into, you got to leave them, you got to leave them. Look at all these abuse channels, no contact, no contact. And actually, I think that really undermines the person's autonomy.
Oh, yeah, it does.
And their right to make a free decision. And I think people, I think it can help to give people their choices. You can say, like, if you decide to leave, you can stay at my place. If you decide to leave, I can help.
Well, it has an implication behind it. And the implication is that they should leave. And that's, I think you're getting the pattern of how I view everything as manipulation.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? Because like, even if the manipulation, like, to me, like literally, it's like almost literally everything, where it's like, if I'm having a conversation with somebody and they're saying nice things to me, that's manipulation, that they're trying to get me to feel a certain way, either about myself or about them or about what they think about me.
Wow. There's so much overthinking going on.
Oh, yeah. But here's the thing is, it's not, people are like, oh, it sounds tiring to live like that. It's tiring ignoring it. It's far more tiring to ignore it, because I have to basically be telling myself, this person might be trying to hurt me, and I just have to let it happen.
That's a real inability to trust people.
Well, people are cruel. I want to point out to everybody, most of these things I know are not true, but I'm speaking very strong. I'm speaking more to my instincts than how I actually view things nowadays. I mean, it's the emotional versus rational brain, right? My rational brain knows most of this stuff is fucking insane. The other half of my brain knows that, like, it's true.
Do you want me to put that into therapy language for you?
Yeah, sure.
Your healthy adult knows it's irrational.
Yeah, you want to use it.
Yeah. You have an underlying vulnerable child who's had some very painful experiences that lead you to think you're defective and that other people can't be trusted. And then you have your coping modes that come in, pay attention, be paranoid, watch this person, scrutinize, and protect yourself.
I guess that's another big issue too, is that like basically, like, you can see me doing it right now, where I'm basically trying to calculate what I should say in order to get the responses that I want, or people even look at me better. Like, I'm in my head right now, I'm thinking, oh man, this is really coming back off. This is coming off really bad for destigmatizing narcissism. I need to present this in a different way so people aren't going to the conclusion that I am evil, or that my disorder is evil, more accurately. If you think I'm evil, then I think you're more accurate about me than most. That's also not rational. But it's this like constant calculation of, I have to say the right thing.
Wow. I asked on a psychologist forum for questions put to you, and someone asked me a question that I wasn't going to put to you, but I think I might anyway.
What is it?
What would you like to say on behalf of your vulnerable side?
Oh, yeah. That doesn't exist. I don't know. For my vulnerable side, I hate my vulnerable side, if I'm speaking to the truth.
Yeah.
And that has been the biggest part of my therapy, is learning to be vulnerable with people.
Yeah.
But that's what the bad part is, that's what feels real and I view as defective. And that's inherently the issue, isn't it? Is that that's what the grandiosity is trying to defend against.
That's a very punitive side of you speaking, isn't it? I hate this vulnerable side of me.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I had this sense of, especially when I was growing up, that like I had killed past me. And that was a good thing. And I like the child I killed, and now I'm just this shell that's walking around. And I thought that was just a me thing, and it was fucking insane. But then both, like without me saying it first, both Tess and Spirit Narc and then Cluster B Milkshake or Sarah, they both said that they had like the same feeling. I was like, holy shit, this isn't it. And like when I mentioned this in a video, I had a couple narcissists be like, oh my God, I thought that was just me. And like we have this joke now where it's like, we don't have an inner child, we have a dead one.
Wow. That's pretty stark.
No, yeah.
Because when you say it, it hits me. I'm like, oh, I feel that. And then I don't think you do. Or you don't let yourself.
I mean, it's probably more that I want it to be dead.
Yeah.
Man, this is getting intense.
It's getting really intense. And I'm like, I'm not your therapist. This is not a therapist.
Yeah.
But
I can see myself accidentally bringing out, if you have a schema for being a therapist, I'm definitely prodding at it right now, it seems.
Yes, you are. You're bringing out my therapist mode.
All right, next question then.
Wow. Okay. Let me go. How do you think narcissism or those kind of coping modes that you have, how do they affect your relationships?
Romantic or platonic ones, or both.
Oh. Romantic, platonic, workplace?
I make my romantic partners feel unappreciated and like they're replaceable, because I don't want to come off as dependent. I don't want them to see that I care about them or need them, because I feel like if they see that, I feel like if people don't feel like they need me, then there'd be no reason for them to stick around. And if they realize I am weak deep down, then they'll realize that they don't need me. And I don't want to show them that. And that has affected both my, like, I remember when I lost a bunch of my friends in high school, everybody's complaint was like, none of them thought like, everybody felt like I felt like that they were beneath me. And because of that, they couldn't have like a true fulfilling relationship with me. And that led to a lot of issues, because people just felt like even though these were like my closest friends, and I did very deeply in my own way care about them, they felt like they were nothing, which is very ironic how I can project that feelings like without even thinking about it onto people. And it was shocking that people felt like that. I thought I was doing a great job at like being loyal, like doing things for people and stuff like that. But because I couldn't emotionally connect to anybody, none of them felt like I was really their friend, even though I spent like every day with these people.
How did it feel for you to hear that? Because you've clearly sought some feedback from people.
I felt like they were stupid. I felt like they were ungrateful. And then deep down, I felt like nobody ever actually cared about me. It felt like I was confirmed about everything I thought in my life. I thought they were just looking for reasons to not want to be around me.
Gosh. Is that changing?
Yes and no. I've gotten a lot better at being vulnerable with people. And to my knowledge, my friends nowadays don't feel like that. And I think I have friends nowadays that need less emotional intimacy than, because like I don't think I'm going to be capable of being emotionally intimate to the degree that people would expect. I mean, how, like, I just got a relationship that we're trying to work on things now again, but she felt the exact same way as my previous exes did. And I had no clue that she felt like that. I thought it was so obvious how much I valued her. And I was baffled to hear it again. And the only reason that we're even working on things now is because, like, she came over for the last, like, this was basically like, she was basically, because like she had agreed to feed my roommate's cats while he was gone because I didn't want to fucking do it. And like, she texted me, was like, hey, can we talk? I'm like, I'm fucking wasted, but sure. And like, she says these things to me. I end up like, I don't like saying this, but I was like bawling on the ground, being like, I felt like that I was the one that felt replaceable. I felt like she could love anybody and probably love them more because I am defective. And I felt like in that moment, I felt like she was the only person I've ever cared about. And that's lack of emotional permanence, right? Um, and she was so aghast that I was saying those things because she said that she felt like she was like 100% in it. And I just wasn't. And only because I got drunk and was able to be vulnerable like that was the only reason that we were actually trying to work on things now. Because I mean, even when I'm sober, it's a lot harder to connect to those emotions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that sucked.
It is. It's really, it's painful, you know, because I know one of the questions that was put to me, and I thought, wow, like someone asked, what does loneliness feel like for you? And I mean, my thought as someone who works with a lot of narcissists is like, that's what they feel all the time.
I mean, hell, even in high school, I remember like trying to, because I didn't really have a word for not being able to emotionally connect to people at that point. And I remember like telling him, like, I just feel lonely all the time. And he was like, you have more friends than anybody I know. And I'm like, you don't get it. I feel lonely all the time. When I was younger, I literally tell people that like they don't know what true loneliness is like. And even to this day, I'm skeptical if they do or not. Because it is lonely. It's a prison of your own self-absorption where you can't really let anybody in. Because how do you stop feeling lonely if you feel like nobody ever really knows you? Does that make sense?
Yeah, what would you like people to know?
It doesn't feel like there is somebody to know. Even when I was younger, like I was really young when I was told somebody this. I was like 14 and I told somebody that I felt like I had been pretending for so long that I forgot who I was. And to this day, that's still an issue. I don't feel like there is anybody to know underneath the shell, but I still desperately want somebody to know what's underneath the shell.
Mm.
And I have no idea what or who that is.
I mean, that's painful and raw.
Yep.
And, you know, I'm
It's not fun.
resisting the urge to offer some kind of therapy explanation because that's not my role.
Fair enough. You're lucky my channel is literally oversharing the YouTube experience. So it's easier for me to just, because this doesn't even feel real. I mean, it feels real, but it's like, cause it just doesn't feel vulnerable to me anymore. It doesn't feel like me showing all these things is vulnerable. The most vulnerable I feel like anybody's ever saw me as is like once I was dating this girl and I was like pretty drunk. And like I literally went to the bathroom and started throwing up more from shame than the alcohol, if I'm being honest. I don't know if people know that like shame has literally made me vomit before, even without alcohol, but it has. Um, and like she like comes in to try to like help me. I'm like sobbing there, being like, oh, I'm broken, defective, and sick, like simultaneously, like going back and forth between telling her like to get away from me and then trying to get her closer to me and stuff like that. And then like I was so ashamed of that the next day that I literally didn't bring it up. She like asked me and I was like, I don't want to talk about it. And like I just tried to pretend it never happened. But that was one of the most real I've ever felt with somebody before.
Yeah. And then you push it away.
Oh, yeah. Yep. We broke up like a few months after that.
Yeah. Do you want me to go into therapy mode? And kind
If you want.
Because it actually reminds me of something I always say more to the abuse survivors. I'll often say, you know, look, you've been in this relationship, you've lost yourself, you've lost parts of yourself, you've become disconnected from so much of you. And one of the kind of approaches I'll often say is I kind of want you to start to relate to yourself. And it can be gentle. It doesn't have to be like some big, intense and emotional experience. It can just be, hey.
Sorry.
I really don't like this bit, huh?
No, I just was unplugging my phone. I'm sorry. I was just trying to
like, go away.
I'm like, all right, I gotta go be vulnerable. I'm covering up the camera, right?
No, like I'll often say, you know, you need to get to know yourself. You need to go and just try things like you would if you were dating someone for the first time. Go and just pay attention to what gives you pleasure, what gives you joy, what surprises you. Notice how you are in different situations. It's like get to know yourself.
It's funny.
I'm wondering if I should start doing the same with the narcissists I work with. Like, I want to help you actually start to love yourself.
I mean, it's what I mentioned this in one of my videos. Ultimately, it is the ultimate projection that I do. I make people feel like I do.
Yeah.
But they don't have the same defenses to deal with it. Yeah. My ex talked about all the time, well, after we broke up, that like she felt like she lost herself in me. And I never understood it. And like last time I reached out to her like relatively recently, and then she was like, you can't keep reaching out a couple of years. I'm like, okay, yeah, it was violation of boundaries. I'm sorry. I won't do it again. And I remember her saying, you never saw me as a real person. And I need you to see me like I'm a real person. I'm not just somebody in your story. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? And it made me realize how I did force her into a role in my story. And even now, I view her through the lens of my own personal growth as opposed to who she is. Because honestly, I never did get to know her, did I? She was just somebody in my story. And still is.
Yeah. Which is a horrible place to be for both you and her.
Oh, yeah. Probably more so for her, but
Yeah. What do you... It's kind of interesting, like tied in with that. If you could give up your narcissism, would you?
which is something I have been struggling with a lot. Because let me put it this way, if I was born and at the start, I could choose not to have my narcissism, hands down, fucking hands down. I wish I was never like this, but now, how would I even relate to the world? How would I act? How would I even be? Would I have any defenses? Will I just be raw? Am I just going to allow people to just hurt me over and over again? And it's like an issue that we have in some of our communities too, because some of them are like, I don't just, and like they don't say it like this, but I think the thing that they're trying to hide against is they're terrified. They're terrified to lose their narcissism. And it's the same, and it is the same for me. I'm getting to a point where I'm like, I have to give up so many of my defenses that have been the only way I've been able to navigate the world thus far. And I'm like, how would I, if I wasn't constantly thinking right now about how I'm going to reply to you, about what I'm going to say, about what the viewers are going to think, about how I'm coming off, about the message I want to tell you, how would I even interact with people? You know what I mean?
What do you think is underappreciated about narcissism? I mean,
Under,
like, are
huh?
there good aspects to it? Does
Oh,
it give
good
you
aspects.
something? Yeah.
Well, I'll be honest, grandiosity highs feel fucking great. Feels like I'm on cocaine. Um, not quite that intense, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I would say that honestly, I think lack of emotional empathy can be a benefit if you use them the right way. I mention this all the time, how like I acted as like a de facto therapist for some of my friends because I kind of treated it like a game and be like, okay, if I can fix their problems, they get helped, and also they're going to tell me I'm smart and wise and help to them, and I'm going to feel good about myself. Everybody wins. I would say the calculating nature of it can be a positive thing. I think me being able to take risks and reach out to people because of moments of overconfidence is a good thing. Like Mark, me and him had a great interview because I basically was like, I didn't have his email, but I like made a comment being like, hey bro, you want to come on my channel? Like, I think your stuff is like really good. I want to expose more people to it. Um, I think those are the main ones, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the main ones. Whatever.
Yeah. So, if someone, I'm looking at my notes, sorry. If someone, because we talked around, there was lots of kind of
Yeah.
come up. If someone was getting close to you, what advice would you give them? Or close to you or close to anyone with these kind of tendencies? And I hesitate to say that because everyone is different.
Yeah.
So you can't have here is a 3-step guide to dealing with a narcissist. But in general, what would you suggest?
It's earnestly something I warn people about nowadays, that I am difficult. I need very strong boundaries. I need outlets for very extreme emotions. And you're right, it is very varied. Like how much you're willing to put up with. How are they aware? Because I do genuinely believe that a narcissist who has gone through the work and has worked on themselves is going to be more healthy than a normal person who never has. It's what else? I had a really good one before we started recording. I fucking completely forgot. Strong boundaries. You're going to have to get them to be vulnerable somehow. And you're going to have to, and that's probably going to be distressing. Me being vulnerable is just pure, raw, intense emotions, and that can be overwhelming. But again, it really depends on the situation. I really can't think of much more right now. I had a really good thing to say. I can't believe I'm forgetting it.
I might come back to you.
Okay. If I remember it, I'll mention something.
Yeah. It does seem off piece compared to the rest of the interview, but I was asked, and I'm interested to hear, what do you think about the term personality disorder?
Ooh. It's
quite controversial.
Yeah, because I did touch on this in one of my videos. Because like a lot of people view, well, one, there's some people in those fields who don't think that like personality disorders are a real thing, really. And I think those people have never met somebody with a personality disorder, if that's the thing. And a lot of people think that it's like, oh, I'm telling you your personality is flawed. I'm like, no, it's not. You're telling me I have a disorder that affects my personality. That gave me so much comfort that it wasn't just me. I'm not the one who's flawed. It's this disorder that's affecting who I am. And that's so much easier to grapple with than anything else. Because ultimately, if it wasn't a disorder, I'd just be an asshole. And I don't feel like just an asshole. I feel like fucking insane half the time. I've never really had an issue with it, if I'm being honest. And if somebody has as long as we're not getting rid of the construct, if somebody has a better name for it, I'm open to it. I can't really think of a better name though. Maybe I find more of an issue with the narcissistic part of the personality disorder rather than the personality disorder part of it. I feel like it's a lot of people. I've never met somebody who didn't like personality disorder who has a personality disorder. And I feel like it's these people, well, I kind of feel like it's people who don't want to treat personality disorders, not gonna lie. But I also feel like it's people at best who are making assumptions about what people like me want in terms of what will make us more comfortable and open to treatment.
Interesting.
It's kind of my view.
No, it's an interesting. It's a really interesting take. It's not. Um, it is certainly in the UK. I
Yeah.
know the people who ask these questions were UK-based psychologists, and many UK-based psychologists do not like the term personality disorder.
Are they asking their patients? That's my question.
Yeah, and I think patients have a range of views on that.
Yeah, I'm sure. I've personally never met one that has an active issue with it personally, but yeah, obviously anecdotal evidence doesn't mean that much.
Well, is there anything else you want to say? Or do you want to go back to that question about advice for someone?
Can I drop some statistics?
Yes.
Because I do a lot of reading about the empirical data behind narcissistic personality disorder. If you go on my channel, like half of them have, well, not half of them, a good portion of them have like links to studies and stuff. When people say that we're not treatable, 53% of narcissists can go into remission based on one study done. And so that's just a blatant lie. And only 44% of narcissists lack empathy. And the most likely trait to go in remission is interpersonal exploitation. The most stable trait is that need for admiration. And I think that kind of is obvious about why that is, because we do need fucking validation all the time. Funnily enough, the only trait that actually went up after the treatment period, like the only symptom was a feeling of specialness. Which I thought was hilarious because they were hearing their narcissist. I'm like, oh, I am different because I had the exact same reaction.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing. You
Oh,
know,
I don't think so either.
someone who truly feels defective, if they shift towards seeing themselves as I'm special a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm important.
And
I matter.
I would say it's because I wouldn't say it's even necessary. I feel like a lot of clinicians assume that our feelings of like borderlines too, where it's like we feel constantly misunderstood, we feel like we are different, stuff like that. I think they're over pathologicalizing it, pathologizing. Because I always felt different because I knew I operated different than other people. I knew that I wasn't like other people, and that was part of the loneliness. I can't express how much how amazing it was to talk to Tess for the first time. That like there was finally someone who like got it. It felt like everything I believed, I was just like told I was wrong about, and it felt like they were lying about it. And I talked to Tess, who saw things in the same way, and I was like, oh my God, it's everything I've ever believed. Thank God I'm not the only, because like before, I knew, like, even when I had my diagnosis, I knew there's other people like me, right? It never even occurred that I'd meet somebody and on top of that, be so similar. Oh my God, that was great. And so, yeah, so I do think it's over pathologized how much that's feeling of specialness or differentness at the very least is wrong. And who knows, maybe it is as pathological as they say, but I don't think so. And then the other statistic is a lot more morbid, but due to according to a study done in Quebec, and I think it was 2015. I have a link to it on my channel. And this was first of all, these were only diagnosed people, and it surveyed like around 6 million people. It was insane. And 20.3% of people with cluster B personality disorders committed suicide during the course of that study. Not only that, but borderline and narcissistic were actually the highest, with antisocial and histrionic allegedly actually bringing down that statistic. And yeah, and I think that's important for people to realize that, like, and like, I fucking hate when I get like a comment that's like, oh, well, how many people kill themselves from narcissistic abuse? And I'm like, fucking not that. I can't believe that people try to diminish that an insane suicide rate. That like, if that was affecting more people, that'd be a national crisis. Try to diminish it by saying that, because the worst thing that can happen from getting abused by a narcissist is CPTSD, in my opinion, right? And like, those are the worst of the worst cases. They have half the suicide rate of cluster B.
I think we can see both people suffering without.
True. We shouldn't be comparing it, obviously. Yeah. It's just that people diminish it based on that. I wanted to point out was not accurate.
I think you're right that we kind of see there is a kind of caricature of the narcissistic person who goes around thoroughly enjoying their life, having a great time, being very successful. And sometimes they are successful in some areas,
Sure.
right? But the reality is it's a miserable disorder, and it's a miserable experience, and it's incredibly distressing.
And
And
it's
not only
lonely.
that, and it's lonely, and it's not only that, it's very difficult to get help because many therapists won't work with it. And therapists struggle to work. It is challenging to work with someone who's got strong narcissistic defenses, for sure.
I
Right?
could be lying to my therapist for 2 years.
Yeah, you have to have a bit of tenacity to do that. But I think you're right. I think that suffering is underappreciated. And in as much as I wouldn't say to someone who's been, I mean, I want to say this really clearly, someone who's been abused, I'm not suggesting that you need to have compassion for the person who abused you.
Yeah. Yes.
I think
Agree.
culturally and socially, we really do need to build compassion for narcissists.
I mean, it's something I point out all the time. If you really want, if like narcissistic abuse is this epidemic as people view it, and I'm not saying it's not, but I'm like, I'm assuming that these are what these people believe. Why are you against encouraging wider awareness of narcissism from the reality of it? Because the way to stop that is to get the people who are committing it help. And I personally, I believe if there is somebody, and like there's some things that people can do in an abusive relationship that are unforgivable, I believe that most people can change over a long enough period of time. And if they can, that will be very good, to say the least, for not only them, but for the future people that they might be with and stuff.
Absolutely. I agree. Is there anything else you want to say or add?
Yeah, not really.
Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And
I appreciate you having me on for sure.
like, subscribe, leave a comment. I'm sure Jacob will reply.
Go to my YouTube channel.
You go to his channel. And Spirit Narc and Cluster B Milkshake.
Yes, both very good as well. They're my friends.
Because they are his friends, but also I think if you want to really get your head around what it's like to live with these kind of cluster B and narcissism in particular, I think you'll get such an insight.
And it also shows that we're all different. I like that part too.
Yeah, and you are so different. And people get their self-esteem juice, which is totally a term that you've introduced to me, in different ways.
Yeah, 100%.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you again. Thank you for having me on.